Okay, so for those who are new to the podcast, welcome. For those who've been here before, you kind of know the routine, but we're super happy to have everyone here again. Again, if you have not done so yet, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, help us grow the podcast, help us grow the show. And tonight we have Tony in the hot seat. And Tony had some big things happening here soon or just recently that kind of went and helped a fellow brother out, which was super awesome of him. We'll get into all that stuff here in just a bit. So for those who are not familiar with the show, we get to meet Tony first, talk a little bit about him, get to know him, find out what makes him tick, where he's at in life, all that good stuff. And then we get into our main topic, which is intimacy in marriages tonight. That is our topic for the night. So, and I know some of you think, okay, we've already talked about this, but everybody's got their own story. And truthfully, the times we have discussed intimacy in relationships, it is such a big topic, and it's such a broad array of options that we can go down as far as talking about different things. We obviously want to keep it respectful. This isn't here to just have some kind of dirty talk or something like that. It's just a matter of how do we discuss this in a healthy way and have healthy, meaningful relationships, maybe learn something that we can utilize in our next relationships moving forward. And this is one that for sure, I believe will be a benefit tonight for those who are listening. So for all those that are here, welcome. And for Tony, we're super happy to have you.
Thanks.
Just
I was
one
promised dirty talk tonight, so I don't know if I'm.
Oh, shoot. Wait, Flameless Fireside? Wrong podcast. Sorry, let her fly. No, I'm just kidding. So just one last bit of business for those who are in the audience. Please make sure you keep your microphone and your cameras turned off. That way we can kind of help keep the show focused on kind of what we're talking about here. Also, there will probably come a point in the podcast where we open it up for the audience to ask questions. At that point, we'll ask you to raise your hand and we'll call you one at a time. We'll invite you to turn on your microphone and your camera if you would like. If not, that's entirely up to you. You can just simply come on audio and ask if you are laying in bed and you don't want to appear on camera. That's totally understandable as well. But in the meantime, please keep your microphones muted and your cameras off. So having said that, Tony, welcome.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, I don't really know you. And I love podcasts where I don't know that person because then it feels natural just getting to know you. So right. I'm looking forward to this one because I was super pumped to see what you did for Nick. And we'll get into that in a bit. But I'm like, what a good guy.
Just happenstance, too. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know he was involved with Flameless Fireside at all. And it was just neat to meet him. And like I said, I was just responding to someone that I saw a post about and had no idea who he was. So that was really fun.
That makes you even more amazing, Tony, that you did that you didn't know him and you still went. I mean, that's awesome.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for those who don't know, I mean, we're kind of talking about how awesome it was and people are like, how awesome was what? So Nick, which a lot of you already know, Nick Perkins was driving cross country in his car with 5 gazillion miles already on it with no roadside assistance, come to find out.
Of course.
One of those things is kind of like, well, fail to plan to fail kind of thing. So he ends up breaking down, I think in Illinois, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Springfield. And was sort of stuck and was like, I don't really know what to do. Is there anybody in the area or even remotely close? And I believe you're 4 hours away, if I remember
about
right.
4 hours away. Yeah.
And not even having known Nick, you answered the call to go over there and fix his car for him and get him back on the road.
And I don't even really pay attention to my phone that much. So I just happened to get on Facebook and he had posted it a minute before.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, I just said, hey, I'm 4 hours away. I don't know if I can help. And he PM'd me and said, yeah, I can do that. So
let's stop right there. Let's stop at the 4 hours. This is not like you were provo to Salt Lake. This is, I mean, like, I see a brother that needs help. I don't know this person, but I see that we're friends on Facebook, and I'm going to get in my car with a friend of mine and drive 4 hours to make sure this person's taken care of. I mean, seriously, Tony.
Super awesome.
I'm kind of surprised because I think that's what we sign up for, right?
Hopefully.
We have the toll road running through our state and through Indiana, and we had this even pre-internet. You know, that's what we were talking about with Nick. Is back in the day, you know, before the internet, you would just call your bishop and say, hey, can you connect me with a bishop or a stake president in Indiana where I'm at? And we'd have people break down along the highway all the time and go help them. So even before the internet, with our communication and connection that we have socially, we still saw that and did that. So
yeah.
Well, I was impressed.
It was fun to meet him. It was fun to meet him. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's fantastic when you know, you see that and just that level of service and willingness to help. And 4-hour trip, like Jennifer was saying, it's not just like you're going down the road, you know, that's a bit of a trip for you. That's an all-day thing.
Did you bring your son? Was that?
No, my friend is actually here. His name's Jason. He's in the audience.
Oh,
so,
very cool, Jason.
Nice.
I said, hey, called him up and said, hey, I just kind of told this guy that we're going to go do this. Like you and like I signed you up like this. Let's go, you know, jump in your car and go do it. And so he was willing as well. And yeah, I mean, it was fun just to hang out with him for a few hours as well. So.
Well, I think what this podcast does too, because everyone's in different states, is I saw also probably on the same thread that you were looking at that Nick was, because due to weather, he was coming through Salt Lake. And I was going to a bowling group that night, you know, a bunch of LDS singles bowling group. And so I just threw it out there and I said, hey, Draper, I mean, like if you, and he brought one of a friend of his that he'd never met that was deaf from online too. And so she came to the bowling alley, and it's just kind of nice to, if you throw it out there and you know people that are in different areas, it's kind of nice because we do in a way know each other from the podcast a little bit at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't help him. I didn't drive 4 hours. I mean, like I went bowling with him. So there's a difference.
It was great. It all went smooth. I mean, just the part itself, it probably took us, I don't know, 30 to 45 minutes to replace. So he was on his way pretty quick.
Wow. Well, that is awesome, man. And I'm glad we can kind of give you a little bit of spotlight here to just say, good job. Good guy. You know, that is good people right there. So now question though, are you a mechanic by trade, or you just know how to work on cars, or is this just one that you got lucky and knew how to fix? Or
so my grandparents had a farm and I was working on things before I could legally drive them. So just over the shoulder of you know, of those, everyone involved with our farm and watching them fix things, and then kind of born of necessity. You know, I'm something breaks down, I can't stand paying someone else to do it, so I would just learn how to do it myself. And so yeah, it's something I've always kind of done, is either work on my own car or other people's cars. And but yeah, I definitely used Google as well to make sure I knew what I was doing and what the problem was, because it was a Prius. And I'm like, I've worked on lots of different things, but never a hybrid or a Prius. And so it was his inverter pump that had gone out, which all it does is cool the inverter inside the car that, you know, transfers it from AC to DC power. And so yeah, it was fun. But yeah, I do it. I dabble, I guess. I'm kind of a backyard mechanic, if you will.
So how far are you away from Dallas?
I was just gonna say that. How far are we?
Your vehicle needs a little bit of work.
Right? Hey, buy the plane ticket. I'm there. So professionally, if you don't mind just getting in a little bit of my resume.
Yeah, of course, go for it.
My favorite subject is me, so
awesome. That's how it should be.
Yes,
right.
Good.
No, I'm kidding. So I went to Rick's College, I mean, my whole life history is I'm a convert. I born and raised in Michigan. Joined the church at 17, like just before my 18th birthday. Served in the Philippines, and then went to Rick's College after all that, and studied horticulture and landscape design. Realized that I hated sales. I just could not stand sales. Which, you know, you can't really teach that if you're not a natural salesman. So I just decided to jump in a semi for a while, because the farm background, driving big trucks and just used to it. And that was challenging. And then eventually got into the oil industry. And that's what I've been doing for a while is the oil industry, doing various things with that, terminal operation, pipeline operation. But I always fixed cars on the side. That was kind of my long intro into that, is I've always done that as a side business. But I did the wisest thing that I could possibly do, which was start my own business full-time fixing cars right before a pandemic. So literally January 1st, 2020, I decided to do that, which was just great timing. So that kind of fell away pretty quickly. And to fill in the gap, I started buying and restoring motorcycles and loved doing that. And then became a full-time student late last year. So.
And where did you go to school?
Right now or back then?
No. Well, yeah, when you went back to school.
Oh, right now, currently, it's Ivy Tech. It's just a local.
Okay.
But I say Rick's College because it will always be Rick's to me. I'm never going to call it by that.
I know. BYU Idaho it's something different.
Now we start to date
something
ourselves.
for our grandchildren.
Hey, I went to BYU Idaho.
You date yourself a little bit when you say Rick's College, you
That's
know.
right.
I know. I was there right when it transitioned. So.
Now, were you there when Bednar was president?
Yes. Yep.
Did you think that he would be an apostle? I mean, I knew some other people who went there and they're like, oh yeah, he's going to be an apostle for sure. Like they were
I totally felt it. He was amazing. Just amazing. Even Hinckley came onto the campus and said, the reason why we're transitioning from 2 to 4 years specifically because of the spirit that resides on this campus. And he wanted people to enjoy the campus for longer. And so I think Bednar had a lot to do. I mean, everyone involved had a lot to do with it, but Bednar especially.
Yeah. So what are you studying now? I mean, obviously it sounds like you've kind of gone through a lot. You've gone through oil, you've gone through starting and failing your own business thanks to a pandemic, restoring motorcycles.
So I'm doing electromechanics right now.
Oh.
So everything that's involved with the power side of things, controls, to the mechanical side of whatever the power or whatever it's controlling. So it's going to just help my resume because I'm looking to get back into the oil industry eventually. And, you know, you can be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, controlling a pump that's 1,000 miles away. So that's what I want to get into and get excited about.
Gotcha. Now, when you were you said you kind of got into the oil industry. I know North Dakota has like a lot of fracking and you got the pipeline and all that. Were you involved with kind of the fracking stuff going on?
Well, so I originally was with Sunoco Logistics, and we were bought out by New Energy, and I didn't realize at the time that they owned that XL pipeline that was so controversial. They were the ones that were installing it. So I had no idea at the time, because the thing about oil is names change all the time. You never know. I mean, they're transferring, people buy each other out, and it's hard to actually check out like the ancestry, that like the oil ancestry of some of these companies. So I didn't even realize that I was kind of working for that same company at the time.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I had a friend that was part of the fracking industry there in North Dakota, and it was just boomtown for a long time. Yeah. And then it sort of seems like it's kind of dried up quite a bit. And you kind of notice that in the gas prices going up, unfortunately. But What do you do?
I mean, if I really understood the oil industry, I'd be a millionaire. So
You may be a billion.
it usually doesn't make sense. So, I mean, something you think is rather small happens in some country far away, and they'll raise the price of oil.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I want to know what happened because we used to have really good gas prices here in Dallas, and they've gone up like almost $1. I'm like, what?
Well,
the
first
heck
of all,
going on?
that barge is stuck in the canal. I read there was a barge stuck that is carrying gas over, and that's raised prices. And then they've shut the pipelines down, right? That's my understanding is where like and I could be totally way off, but
I'm in Texas. Like we have really good supply of gasoline. I'm like, what's going on?
like
Not
I
happy.
said, it usually doesn't make sense.
No.
I think in Texas they had a pipeline that they were kind of working on there, and a big oil refinery plant, and they got overrun with tarantulas, and everybody got kind of like murdered.
exactly.
So
It got shut down.
it happens there in Texas.
Oh my
So
God.
they're on their way to Celeste's house.
Inside joke. Celeste is like, yeah, she doesn't like tarantulas, but they're there in Texas. So anyways, so tell me a little bit about, I mean, you said you're a convert, you sort of skipped over that really quick, but that's a big deal, you know, especially in your teenage years to join the church. How did all that happen? Tell me a little bit about that.
And then to go on a mission on top of that is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that was hard. That's probably one of the harder things I've done. So I went to the same school, K-12 here in Michigan. You know, I felt very fortunate because so many people move around, transfer schools, and have to deal with all that. It can be stressful. And just 1 year, this kid moved in, and we always hated we're in a kind of a small rural school, and like my graduating class was 81 people. So when a new kid moved in, he was the hottest thing walking down the hallway because he was the, you know, fresh meat. And we always hated move-ins. Like we're the guys like, you know, so this kid's name was Gannon. Sounds like Dan and yogurt, but with a G. And I had a girl, my girlfriend just break up with me, and he comes in and she's like enamored with him, and so I instantly didn't like this guy. And but then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna show her that I'm the bigger man, and I'm gonna be friends with this guy, and I'm just gonna yuck him, you know, and just pretend like, you know, he's the greatest thing. And he really was. Like I really got to be good friends with him. We became like locker partners and all that stuff. And then he was Mormon. So he didn't really overwhelm me with it. You know, it wasn't really something that he talked about all the time, but I knew a little bit about it. For me, really the only thing I knew is that's the church with the commercials. That's what I knew, you know, that's all I knew. And so yeah, the background. So my parents divorced when I was 18 months old, and I had a kind of a deadbeat dad. He was not really there a lot in my life. But I had a stepfather. He came around when I was about 5 or 6 or so, and wasn't always the greatest relationship with him. And so eventually it kind of came to a point to where I got kicked out of the house. So long story, basically I brought home a dog where my mom said I could, but then he was against it. So he basically said, as long as you have that dog, you're not coming in this house. So I just left. Ooh. I took my tent, my truck, and my dog, and I just left.
And your mom let that happen?
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. So I could tell you more. But to continue on this path, so my Gannon found out about it and told his dad, and his dad said, absolutely not, you know, just have him come here. And so I moved in with their family. Because it was only like a couple of days. It's not like I go around saying I was homeless forever. It was like 2 or 3 days. I was just, you know, camping out and doing my own thing and just hanging out with my dog. And so moved in with his family, and that was really like one of the biggest things they wanted to talk about was that I would attend church with them, and I didn't have a problem with that. You know, it was my first like anxiety about it was that all I had was like band t-shirts and ripped jeans, and I had long hair. I know, which is shocking. I did actually have long, flowing, luscious hair at one
Wow.
point. And so about the same length as Celeste, but I used to shave it on the side, which was, you know.
Oh, very nice.
I know.
Kind of like maybe a ZZ Top type of.
Were you partying in the back and business?
Yeah.
Like
I was gonna say like a mullet.
Yeah.
you were wearing the Tennessee top hat.
That that look came back where they're shaving on the side.
Oh, I know. That's crazy.
So I had that back in like early 90s. And
Billy Ray Cyrus.
no,
Yo.
I actually got the idea from a band that I'm struggling to remember the name of right now, but the lead singer had his hair cut that way. I was like, that is cool. I'm going to do that.
Faith No More.
Faith No More. Yes, thank you.
I got you covered.
Thanks, man. That was awesome. So anyways, I was kind of like, they're going to judge me. You know, they're going to give me a hard time with what I'm wearing and how I look, because I've had that experience so many other times. We weren't religious growing up. Like the thing my mom made me do the most was like watch the 10 Commandments every year. Like that was, we had to do that. And, but then my exposure to religion was, if I was spending the night at a friend's house, we went to church with them that morning. So I got to see a lot of different faiths and religions. And eventually I had a great interest in it, just different questions, and I'd start asking things, and then everyone had a different answer, and then eventually I was at this point where I didn't believe in any organized religion. I thought organized religion was all about money, and it was about wealth, and that's all I saw. But I never disbelieved in like the Bible or the atonement or the Savior, even though everyone had a different answer exactly who God was. So, you know, little things like that. So my first impression was they were friendly, they were nice. I never had anyone say anything negative to me. You just felt good when you're in the building. And, you know, I didn't recognize it then, but I know now that it was the Spirit, and recognizing that this is like a great place. And, you know, it's not like everyone came up to me, but I wasn't expecting that, but more than what I expected. And I had a better reception than I ever expected. And so eventually I started taking the discussions and went through sets and sets of elders, because I was on the fence. I was kind of nervous. I you know, probably 3 or 4 missionaries invited me to baptism, and I just flat out denied them and said no. I couldn't even tell you. I mean, I was young. I was definitely young, and I knew it was a commitment, and I wasn't sure if I could do the commitment. And so
And how many teenage friends at this time did you know that were members of the church?
just Gannon. Well, okay. Actually, I take that back. What surprised me is when I went to church, I'm like, you're Mormon too? Like people I grew up with, you know, I had no idea were members. And so, but yeah, really the closest friend I had at that point though was Gannon. And I mean, I had other friends outside of the Mormon religion who were religious as well that, you know, I had good friendships with. But what I was getting into was that eventually I experienced General Conference for the first time, which was October of 1995. And I think it was President Hinckley's second conference from becoming president at that time. So it's fairly new to being the president. And just experiencing, like, my perception at that time as a teenager, looking at people his age, wasn't like the best. I just was blown away by all the speakers, everyone involved in General Conference. It just was overwhelming to feel all the feelings I was feeling. And when Hinckley spoke, I just felt like I was the only person in the room. Like everything had gone dark and just there was like a highlight on me. And I just knew that he was a prophet. That's the only way I could explain it. And it was like a domino effect in my mind. Everything that the elders were telling me, everything that they were teaching me, they just fell into place. And I knew if Hinckley is a prophet, Joseph Smith's a prophet, and the Book of Mormon is true. Because at that point, I had not really prayed over the Book of Mormon. I had not prayed to know if the church was true, and I had not prayed about Joseph Smith. That was really the difficult part for me, is prayer and doing all the work that it took to gain a testimony. So I, like I said, was overwhelmed. I was sitting next to the elders, and I looked at one of them and I said, I want to be baptized. And they set it up for the like the next day. It didn't take them long, and they got it done.
Well, they don't want you to change your mind either. They're like, oh no, we've got him. Like, come on.
They knew I had gone through several steps, and so yeah, I was baptized October 7th, 1995. I believe 7th, or yeah, I think I'm doing that right. So my birthday was in December, so yeah, I turned 18, and then as soon as I turned 18, my branch was a branch at the time. My branch president called me in and said, all right, you're 18. You have a year to save $10,000 to learn the scriptures and get yourself ready for a mission.
Wow.
The very next Sunday, I didn't go to church. And I continued to not go to church for several months because I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified by that request, or by that calling to do that. And I love that branch president to this day. He is the greatest guy. He is the greatest family. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. I don't fault him at all, but I turned tail and I ran. And so I was inactive for about 8 months or so, until my friend again, Gannon, tried to get me back to go back to church, get back involved again. And I was embarrassed. I was a little ashamed, and it was something that was very hard for me to get back into. And so he said, okay, he recognized that and said, all right, well, let's go to Institute. I'm like, what's Institute? I had no idea.
Yeah.
So, told me what it was. I thought, okay, that's pretty relaxed. He said, no one's going to know you. No one's going to know what's going on. I said, okay, that's great. What he didn't tell me is that the Institute teacher was this branch president's wife. So as soon as I show up, I'm like, why didn't you tell me Sister Kelly was the Institute teacher? Like, she knows exactly who I am and exactly what happened. So he knew what he was doing.
There's always, with us, there's always a backstory. I mean, like, and it's not a bad backstory. It's just that sometimes when we don't have the strengths, we have to baton it to somebody that does. And it, it works. It's not like a trick or anything, but yeah, I mean, you already had an in with the branch president. And so it was a natural thing. And maybe you were embarrassed, but maybe that was just like a short-term thing. And sounds like it was.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. I just thought it was funny. Like, all right, you got me. I respected his game. So.
And just real quick, as a side note, sorry to kind of jump in here real quick. Celeste is messaging me. She's having thunderstorms and losing power off and on. So she's trying to get back on. So if you see her popping in and out, she's trying to make it work. So my apologies. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in and kind of let everyone know what's going on with that. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, I appreciate it. I was seeing her bounce around. So, I continued to go to Institute for a while, and eventually she gave a lesson about the Holy Ghost. And the thing I love about Sister Kelly is she can be as blunt as a hammer, but it's like with a pillow touch. I don't know even how to describe her. She was so clear, so concise, but yet so loving with her messages. She was just perfection. And so she taught this lesson so well, so sweetly, so lovingly. But then at the end, she was like, if you're not feeling all these things, if you're not having all these gifts and fruits of the Spirit in your life, something is wrong. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I'm not experiencing all this stuff. I'm not experiencing the things that she said. And so I'm just seeing, sometimes I'm distracted by the chats too. Like some of the things people are saying. So I was so struck by that I knew I had to make changes in my life. I knew there's things that I was not doing that I should be doing. And namely, like prayer, like a lot of things that the missionaries taught me just flooded back into my memories. So that night, I decided I'm going to do all that work that I was already asked to do. I'm going to read this Book of Mormon. I'm going to pray to know if it's true. And when I did that, I usually don't share the details of what I experienced, but I received an answer that the Book of Mormon is true. And at that time, I was so overwhelmed with the blessings and stuff that I had gotten from the answer that I had received that I promised to serve a mission because of what I was given, that I should give it to other people. And so because I had spent that time being inactive, it put me way behind, my goal to get on my mission by the time I was 19. So I got a job, started saving. There's a lot of stories there with being laid off and some other things I had to deal with. And eventually it took me a long time. It felt like it took forever. So we're talking about like September, October time period. So I'm getting close to my 19th birthday, and I probably saved for 6 months, and I had maybe $5,000 saved up, and I was losing steam. I was getting, I just thought this is going to take forever. I'm not going to ever get on my mission. And I had never fasted before, and so that struck me as well as, okay, you need to fast and pray about this problem and to find a solution. So that was like a Friday, Saturday that I had done that. I remember I had to work that day, and it was like one of the hardest. If you've never fasted before, I mean, that was tough for me to fast for the first time, especially while working. And so that Sunday, I get called into the bishop's office. Oh, I should back up and say that my best friend's dad became my bishop. So we transitioned from branch to a ward, and his dad became our bishop, our first bishop. And so, like, at first he was like, hey, we don't have to talk about your mission. I'm like, no, let's talk about my mission. Like, I'm ready to go. So he had called me into his office, and I was kind of like, whoa, what's going on? This is unusual. He sat me down. Sorry. And he told me about a family that had just approached him and offered to pay for my entire mission.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And so I was just overwhelmed by that. Like, that was just amazing. And I had no idea. I would have never expected that to happen. Gannon was saving for his mission as well. So we're both like trying to get ready for our mission. And I had $5,000. He had $5,000. So I gave him my $5,000. And we turned in our paperwork at the same time. So
wow. Awesome.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's fine.
I don't talk about this often. So it's still obviously overwhelming to this day. So we're able to put in our paperwork at the same time. So we're on this journey together, and we received our callings the same day. And what I remember is our work schedules were different. So I got mine. I saw the brown envelope. I knew what it was. I like raced to the mailbox, but then I had to wait until he got off of work. So it was like, I don't know, 6 hours, like torture. I'm just looking at this envelope. I just want to tear into it. But we had decided that we're going to open them together and gather everyone together. And so I was like I said earlier, I was called to the Philippines and he was called to Mexico. And when he read his call, he's like, Mexico. And he said his shoulders fell because he hated Mexican food. He hated Mexican food. So
that's why he got called there, is because he did.
That's right.
It.
I hated fish too. So I didn't feel the same way, but I was like, great, I'm going to eat fish for 2 years.
Well, that's when he finds out he gets to Mexico and he's like, wait, it's not Taco Bell? Okay.
I know, right?
It's not.
You get authentic food.
Yeah, I'm sure he's
Right.
out there.
What are street tacos? What are street tacos like? What are they made of?
Right. So yeah, so that gets me to that point, and then everything else was like kind of like the Mormon starter kit. You know, I went on my mission, went to Rick's college, and then eventually got sealed in the temple. So I kind of got the whole package there.
That's awesome. I love hearing stories like that. And yours, you know, I kind of always feel like those people who had a bit of a struggle and had to kind of find their own way to the church, like there's just sort of a bit of strength that goes into that. It's kind of just, it's almost like that old cliche, you know, when you go work out, then without resistance, there's no gains and strength. And it's the same thing spiritually. So kudos to you for all of that. That is.
I appreciate it. You know, I was a ball of nerves because not only did I have to learn the gospel, but I had to learn a foreign language. And I expressed my concerns, and you know, I completely believe that we are surrounded with the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
And my elders quorum president at the time, greatest guy on earth, just loving, sweet, kind guy, unique. He thought I'd be offended. I would never have been offended by this, but he knew my concerns. He knew my struggle. So he bought me, I'm going to forget the name of it, but you know, the childhood, like the child cartoon books that the church had about all the Book of Mormon stories and Bible stories. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. Well, they made a series of videos out of them and everything too. Living Scriptures or something like that.
Well, I'm specifically talking the ones that were published by the church, and they're just like this cartoon version of.
Yeah, it is the Living Scriptures, I think.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it is.
I think the Living Scriptures were a private company, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was later on, a little bit later.
That will answer, but they were specifically put out by the church. They're for the primary specifically. And so he thought, you know, that I was going to be offended, but he's like, this is the best way to get through these. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Like, this was great. So I went through all those. You know, I did my best to get through like the bulk of the scriptures, you know, the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants. The comic pictures. That's exactly right. So I'm looking at the chat. And Doctrine and Covenants, you know, we'll save the Old Testament for like another time. Like, let's just wait on that one. Yeah, Book of Mormon readers. Yeah, that's something like
right.
that.
They were the readers. That's right. Yeah.
Right. So that helped a lot. And it actually, I think, helped a little bit that I actually was learning a foreign language and just seeing things a little bit differently, learning things a little bit differently. And for me, it felt like it helped a lot. But yeah, even like that was my first plane ride, you know.
Oh, wow.
Just, like,
You were a really small town then.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We took this little puddle jumper out of my town to Chicago, and then I thought that I had to gather my luggage from the plane, like from the, you know, the carousel, and take it to the next gate. So I'm sitting here waiting. I'm like, where's my baggage? Or where's my luggage? And then I asked somebody, they're like, it's transferred for you to the next plane. I'm like, I had no idea.
Wow.
And so then I didn't realize that there was also the time change. And I mean, I was minutes from missing my flight, and I would have no idea what I would have done. So even stuff like that was just nerve-wracking to me. But all in all, it's all great memories. It's great experiences. And like Everett said, it was, you know, I started a little small, you know, like with the Book of Mormon readers and like, you know, primary, and tried to my first calling was in the primary too, which was amazing. like the best group of, like, all girls, all 5-year-old girls, you know. You know, it was
Just so you know, that's where they usually put like the
right.
converts, just because you know what, you get to learn the gospel on such a simple way. You're teaching it simple, they learn it simple, and I think it's like the best way to learn it.
They
Not
taught,
even just converts, those of us who come like
Oh,
reactive, they did. Like I wasn't active till my early 20s, and that they always stuck me in primary too. And I was like, whoa, these are so cool. Like learning the lessons, I'd be teaching the kids, like all
Right.
excited because I had learned something new.
I thought everyone just liked it because they got snacks, you know. Eating
Well,
goldfish
and that's
crackers.
true. You know, it's true until they took away the snacks, and then we had to like sneak in the snacks. So
can I tell you, I don't know if this, you know, you never know who needs to hear certain things, right? But I remember that was my first challenge with primary. That was my first challenge to my testimony, because I'll tell you honestly, like from an outsider perspective, my first like experience in primary, I thought they're brainwashing these kids. Like, this is nuts. Like, what is this? What did I just get myself into? It was bizarre to me, just the way it was, just all the things they did. And that I remember fighting those feelings, and you had to go back and forth and remember the, you know, the Book of Mormon and your testimony with that stuff. And I remember fighting certain things,
Yeah.
even like being in the stake center one time and seeing a picture of Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ, like in the sacred grove, and they look exactly alike. And that bothered me like deeply, and that really challenged my testimony. Little things, the transition, you know, Mormons have their own language and
Yep.
In their own culture, depending on where you're at.
yeah.
there's so many different levels to joining the church.
Yep.
I lost friends over it. I lost, even my father disowned me, wouldn't talk to me. You know, other family members distanced themselves from me. Things that I would have never expected to happen in personal relationships happen. So there's a lot involved. And it's really hard to understand if you've grown up in the church. And also, like, I was always jealous of people who grew up in the church. I think I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder for a long time because I was a convert, and it always made me feel less than other members, especially in the dating game and getting into the dating world.
I think it's a compliment. I think the Lord saw your strength and was able to not have to have you born into the church. That's my opinion.
You know what? I agree with Celeste. I actually really agree with her.
Well, that's a very mature, I appreciate that, and that's very mature, but that's not the experiences I had when we were single and young and you know.
Well, you know what, Tony, you're dealing with mature right now. I'm not going to say ages, but you're dealing with mature right now.
So I forgot where I was really at in my story, but you guys might need to ask some questions because I don't know what to say.
Well, I was just going to quickly say, like, I thought it was interesting how you had mentioned, like, sometimes in primary, it feels a little bit like they're spoon fed to the kids. And I think that's the truth. I kind of struggled with that too when I came back. I mean, I was learning, but I had a hard time that things were just offered and expected to be accepted versus like challenging them to think for themselves. But just to go with that. But I don't know. I think that your ability to see those things just shows that you were really in tune and that you were prepared to accept it. And the fact that you hung on even when you had those challenges with the picture and all that stuff, like, I don't know, I think that just says a lot about who you are, your character.
Well, I appreciate it. I just saw that chat. What did he study in college? I studied horticulture in college.
Oh, wow.
Were you planning on going back and being a farmer? Is that kind of what the goal was?
No, it was horticulture with an emphasis in landscape design. So even though I had, I didn't grow up on a farm. My grandparents had a farm. I didn't really have an interest in farming. My dad actually had a construction company and had no interest in that either. I think my dad wanted me to follow and take over his business, but it just is never something I enjoyed doing. I mean, I enjoy knowing that I've help build that house, or help put in those sidewalks, or, you know, certain things, that projects that are still in the area that I did, even landscape designs and stuff that I designed and installed. That's all really awesome feeling, but nothing ever really stuck. So yeah, I what stuck was oil. I don't know why, but once I got into oil industry, I just loved it. Absolutely loved it.
You kind of found your niche, huh?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. You come home off your mission, you go to Rick's.
Mm-hmm.
Some people know it as BYU Idaho. Us older people still refer to it as Rick's. But is that where you met your wife, your ex?
All right. So I will say, and you can correct me, I don't like calling her my ex, you know, it just kind of dehumanizes her a little bit for me personally. So her name's Sarah with an H. And Sarah and I were actually in the same stake. She grew up in the church here and grew up in the area. But because the time I joined, and then the short time that I was actually active while I was a youth, I never met her, never, you know, really met her at stake, anything stake levels, because she was you know, we were in the same stake, but she was a few wards away.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had met her brother through Institute, and then I met her other brother as well through some Institute events. And his name is EJ, and EJ and I decided to be roommates at Rick's. So we got that all set up and did that. And then, so we just always hung out with, there was a lot of people from our stake at Rick's at the time. So we just hung out together a lot. And so that's kind of where I got to know her a lot better. Actually, the very first time I met her was at seminary graduation in our stake. I was home from my mission. I met her once. And that was about it. There wasn't really much there. And then it wasn't until Rick's where we were hanging out a lot, spending a lot of time together, where I got to know her. And eventually, you know, second semester, winter semester, went home from winter break and realized I missed her. She was like the one person that I was missing, and just thought about her a lot. And so when I got back, I asked her to go steady. So we started dating.
Go study. I love the term
Oh,
go study. Look at that.
Dating
Old
myself
school.
again.
Old school.
So we dated. I mean, it was like 6 weeks, and I proposed to her. So,
So you didn't date a whole long time, but
no.
No.
So we had spent like every day together though, previous to that, just hanging out, friendship level. So the dating period was pretty short before the engagement. But then we were engaged. By the time we got married, I mean, we had probably known each other for about a year at that point.
okay. So it's not like you had only known her for a little over 6 weeks and dated 6 weeks. You guys were fairly familiar with each other, but
Correct. And familiar with, you know, well, at least her family, you know, because no one in my family were members, so just familiar with each other, hung out a lot. Yeah, so we were in different settings together. We went through that kind of what I would call the 4 seasons a bit, you know, to get to know somebody.
now how long were you guys married?
13 and a half years.
13 and a half years. Okay. And how long have you been divorced?
May 7th, 2015.
Okay.
Yep.
And how many children do you have?
We have 6 kids.
6 kids. Oh, wow. You're busy.
Well, we're kind of on that topic, right? So.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Oh, yeah, totally. We are. We're on the busy topic.
This is the preface, I guess, to the entire discussion. And she had a fairly strong belief that sex was for procreation only. So.
Only.
That is that's a pretty not common, but it's not uncommon, especially within the church.
Right. So.
Did you guys talk about that before you were married though?
So So the thing is that I find interesting, okay, I think I would say as well that memories are tricky, right? It's hard to remember clearly how things went. And what I remember is having these pretty thorough discussions while we are dating, and sex came up. And I said, what about sex? Do you think, you'll enjoy sex? And that's about as far, I thought that was a good question. And she answered it really honestly. She said, I don't know. I've never had it. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's a good, I get that. At this point, I always describe myself as a dirty virgin. Like I was a virgin. I somehow made it through high school without any religious background and did not have sex. So,
Which is like, you get 5 gold stars just for that. So,
well,
you're
I think, I mean, so we're kind of going to go back and forth right a lot with history. Like I had a lot of exposure. I had a lot of things happen, but I remember like sex ed worked really well on me is how I describe it. Like I was terrified of STDs and I was terrified of an unwanted pregnancy, or just pregnancy in general. And if wanted or not, like I remember in junior high with one of my buddies, we would like talk about and fantasize about being dads. And looking back at that, I felt like my dad wasn't there. We didn't really have a great, relationship. And I just wanted more than anything to be a dad and to have my own family, but terrified of, I just remember like this one girl, man, this is, to describe, like parents are gone, house is to ourselves, having a party, and she tells me, I want you to make love to me. And I was terrified. Like what boy wouldn't, and she was gorgeous, and it's
How
like,
old were you at this point?
15,
15.
maybe,
Okay.
Wow.
16, something like that.
Uh-huh.
It's probably the bad boy looks or something that I had going on, but I wasn't. I was not a bad boy.
Maybe she was into Faith No More and she's like, oh man, this is the closest thing to a lead singer
Yeah.
I'll think I can get.
So, but I had even struggled with self-esteem and body image and things like that. So that was even part of it as well. And yeah, but I had experimented a little bit. I've had experiences. I mean, I was exposed to pornography fairly young, like 7 years old or something. My sister brought me out because we were actually at my dad's at that time, and he left Cinemax on late, and like she's like, "Hey, come look what's on TV." I'm like, "Whoa," and so it's like really sad. Even another kind of side subject that even back in my day, how you could run into things and be exposed to things, and how much more it is now. I can't even imagine what kids deal with.
Well, and I think to kind of back up just 1 second for the podcast sake and for even the live sake is, you know what, you're a convert to the church. You come in and you're kind of going back and forth and you feel like this is right. I mean, it's a struggle when you're not a member of the church. It's a struggle when you are a member of the church.
Right.
And so either way, I mean, kudos to you that, and I love your honesty. I love your honesty because I feel like there's a lot of people here that maybe lived the straight and narrow and, hung on to the rod the whole time. And maybe I'm not one of those people. I'm willing to totally, like you, say, okay, I experimented. Yes, I was a virgin when I got married to my first husband. And, but yeah, I really think that it's important for people to kind of see the different sides because we don't all grow up in the church.
Right.
And we all have these other experiences, and the converts that come into the church like yourself and listening to your experiences, I'm like, amazing.
Well, again, you guys are throwing way too many compliments at me.
Oh, they
No.
are well deserved.
Yeah.
I bring it all up because I wanted to give the history because I felt like I had explored my sexuality. At the time when I was talking to her about it, I knew that I did like sex. I wanted it. So, I mean, I wanted the intimacy. I wanted all of that. so that's why I brought it up, because I knew that that was one thing that, you know, what are the big three reasons? I knew kids, money, sex. Those are the three big reasons for divorce. So I knew that, but yet here we are, not experienced, really couldn't answer these questions quite honestly, because we didn't know any better. And so I felt like I knew a little bit about myself and what I liked, and so that's why it came up. So her answer was honest, but then I'm going to struggle to answer the whys, why things happen and why things happen, because to this day I have no idea what went through her mind. I have no idea what she's experienced. Thankfully, I am blessed to have one of my best friends who is a therapist, and I've gotten tons of free advice from him through the years, and he's helped me.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Right. And so, like, one thing I was thinking about was like a Steve quote. A Steveism is, he's always said, he has all these like quotes, and one thing he always said is virginity is overrated. he just one of those weird things and mottos that he puts out there, because that's a story for later on why it came up. But so she, for me, we struggled as a new couple. I think I had it in my mind that we would just like tear into each other, tear each other's clothes off every day, and just go at it. But it was actually really difficult to kind of figure things out and figure out, well, is now a good time or is it not a good time, and learn each other's love languages, and kind of just, how do you initiate it? It was actually more awkward than I thought it would be. And
so can I ask a quick question here around this? Did you guys, I mean, this is sort of a topic that people always get up in arms about, and this is a discussion and a debate that you see going on the Facebook groups, right? Should you talk about intimacy and sex before you get married? At what point, et cetera, et cetera? Did you guys ever have that discussion before? I mean, did you go in with blind expectations about what it was going to be, or did you guys kind of just talk about it and then she got there and balked, you know, to like, I can't do it after all?
So, like I said, I don't have all the answers, but I'll tell you, I couldn't keep her off of me at Rick's college.
That's that is the reputation. Sorry.
I mean, there's times I had to stop, and there's a few times where I felt like a little too far, and even to the point where I felt like I had to talk to our bishop. And but you know, there's no oral sex. There's no, I would just call it heavy petting, you know, as like put under that category.
Yeah.
But I thought we were going to be good. I really thought we were going to be great. And then something just happened. I don't know what it was.
So to stop right there, because you guys are about ready to get married at this point, and you're wanting to, I mean, the heavy petting, all of that. And I mean, there might be a lot of people that can identify, not maybe personally, but they can identify what you're talking about. And so I think that I've told my children that are getting married and are dating and talking to me about, oh my gosh, maybe this is the person. And I always say to them, if you don't feel like you want to rip their clothes off, and this is like a side note because they're raised in the gospel, they have all those principles. But on the side note, if you don't feel like you want to rip their clothes off, and maybe you have to check yourself into the bishop before you get married, you need to just take a step back and say, okay, this is going to be for eternity. This is going to be like, what are we getting ourselves into? And it's not just about gospel principles at this point. You get into a marriage and you're thinking, okay, you're married. What's going to happen from here? If there's not great communication, if you really don't have that attraction that you want to be with that person in every way, you need to take a step back and say, okay, what am I doing here?
Right. I agree 100%.
But obviously, even in those moments, right? I mean, you're saying that at Rick's college, you guys are like all over each other. And I think that's natural, right? I mean, that's Heavenly Father gave us these feelings towards the opposite sex for a reason. He's
Right.
just asked us to kind of rein them in. But even when you're in that moment, that's still no guarantee, right?
Mhm.
Like you found somebody that you guys are just hot for each other, which is great, right? But you sort of go in assuming at that point, like, well, we want to rip each other's clothes off now. So definitely once we get married, clearly our honeymoon's going to be hot and it's just going to be smooth sailing from there on out. But
Right.
Totally.
I mean, it's, if anything, it's even more a testament of this is why having that conversation is important, right? Because you're making these assumptions that may not be correct.
Right. So even though it was a little awkward, you know, I think we're doing all right. The best two virgins can do, right? So
It sounds like a bad Gillette commercial or something.
Yeah.
So what I remember, and we can get into, you know, more of the backstory about Sarah. What I remember is I was a landscape foreman at the time, and it was late. It was getting late, and I came home, and I thought, well, it's gonna happen. Like, you know, I was feeling it, and I was like flirting with her, and like trying to, you know, do a lot of the foreplay and stuff, and she just wasn't like into it. Like I was getting this vibe, like, okay, it's not gonna happen. So I'm exhausted because I had been trying to to have sex way past my bedtime. And I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna give up. And then all of a sudden she's like touching me, and like I'm like, what? Like it's gonna start now? Like I got to get up for work, you know, not long from now. That's all I could think about. And I rejected her. Like it was like within the first 6 weeks, I don't know, maybe 8 weeks. And I was just like, oh, Sarah, you know, like I've been trying all day, but I'm exhausted. I'm ready for bed. Like I need to sleep. And she went crazy. Like I shouldn't use that word. Sorry. She just flipped a switch and just was screaming, crying, and really, really upset. And how, I mean, she really took that rejection extremely hard. Shocked me, like scared me about how bad it was. Because I thought she'd be a little bit more understanding, and I was confused because I was like, I've been trying, you know, to get you in the bedroom since I got home from work. Like I didn't understand. And she was talking about, I thought marriage, you know, was different. I didn't think this was like ever going to happen. And she was just really took that rejection extremely hard. And for me, that's the moment. Right then and there, that was the moment. Because
It was almost like she emotionally disconnected in that moment, and then she never re-engaged.
right. So why I think it's so significant is that I remember a story that she had told me when she was fairly young, like 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. She couldn't stand it when people would come up and tickle her because there's that feeling of being out of control. So she trained herself, is the word she used, at 4 or 5 years old to not laugh or smile when somebody did it so that people would stop doing it. And so like she had that control. She had that ability to just turn things off.
Right.
And to kind of connect this whole story together, it was probably 2 or 3 years in where, you know, we're struggling with this, and she just looks at me and says, I could stop having sex tomorrow and be completely okay.
And how old was she at this time?
So we got married 23,
Okay.
around there. She was a return missionary as well, I guess I should mention. So she had served as well, which something I was looking for. I don't know why I gave that background. Besides, I thought that was important. So yeah, something flipped, because even it wasn't just sex. It was because, like I said, I couldn't keep her off me just from making out, kissing, hands, hugging. She wouldn't let me kiss her anymore. She wouldn't hug me back. She wouldn't hold my hand, nothing. I mean, not just sex, it was all intimacy was completely gone. And that's how it was the rest of the marriage.
And how long had you guys, and my apologies, by habit I keep wanting to say your ex, so I'll try and use Sarah. So if I say that, I'm not trying to be derogatory. I just
You're good.
force of habit on that one. So how long were you and Sarah married at this point when this happened?
The rejection, like my rejection of her, happened maybe 2 months in. My memory is
So it was
probably
really early.
fairly early. But then, like, her rejection of me, I mean, we're in the hundreds, maybe thousands of times, beyond that. And so I never rejected her again. I mean, I don't remember ever turning down sex after that, because it's so few and far between that it happened. Like I said, it was really when she was wanted another child. That's all right. Let's start working on another child, and those were my happy days. So,
And I really think that it's, I mean, like at this point, to stop for just a second to kind of like bridge the gap here. I think that this is where sometimes men and women are different. And I think that it's really about communication. And I think that if you can communicate outside the bedroom and then bring it inside the bedroom, I think that it's really, really healthy. And I think that talking about, I mean, the way you guys were after each other before you got married and then things stopped and things, I think that open communication is really, and it's hard. I mean, I have to say that when you get married, I mean, and this is my own experience, I'm not taking it away from anyone else. I was 19 when I got married, and I was married 26 years. And, in the beginning, we went through the ups and downs, and then we like stabilized, and like in terms of the bedroom and sex, like it became off the charts, and it saved a lot of years of our marriage at that time. And I think that it was just communication in terms of what the other person needed. And I think that men and women during different stages of their life go through, I mean, women go through hormone changes. I mean, we have babies, we are then not having babies, and then we're having babies again, and then we're not having babies. And then I want to bring also into play, when we're not having babies, maybe we can't have babies. Maybe we're trying to adopt. Maybe we're trying to, there's a totally different aspect and a totally different emotional. And so you go through this euphoria of meeting and dating and being all over each other. And then you get married, and then you try to figure things out, and then babies come or babies don't come. You have to deal with what your experiences are. And it's hard. And I think that we have to say that it is hard across the board. And I think that we have to look at our spouse at that time, and we have all been there through the childbearing years, and say, oh my goodness, what are the emotionals up and downs of this for the men and the women? And so I feel your pain.
I should add too, I appreciate all that you said. I'm trying to do the best I can to tell my story from the perspective of 23-year-old Tony, 24-year-old Tony. I mean, I was immature. I was definitely immature. I tried communicating, I tried talking, and I got a lot of I don't knows. I got a lot of, shoulder shrugs. I was struggling. I mean, now when I tell my story, I mean, when I'm meeting people and they ask, do you have any kids? Oh, yeah, I've got kids. How many do you have? 6 kids. And they're like, whoa. Part of that was like, she wanted 10 kids. And I was struggling as a young dad, a young father, young husband, to keep her happy, do whatever I could to keep her happy, because I thought that's the key. If I can just make her happy, she's going to want me, she's going to accept me, she's going to, because honestly, this is what I'm trying to do, is my perspective at the time, 24-year-old guy, that's all I wanted. I just want to work and come home and have sex. Like, it's like I'm going to work and I'm going to want to have sex, and just like, it's like the funny Richard Pryor joke, like that's all men need is, food, and he uses more foul language than that, but just feed me and sleep with me, and that's all guys need.
That's what Dr. Laura says too, by the way.
Well,
The fair, was it the
yes, she actually, yes, she does. She does.
I would like to just, I feel that's true when you're young, because now I need much more than just that. Emotional fulfillment and everything I need now is way more complex than when I was 24. but back then that's all I really felt like I needed to.
But don't you think also that you're maybe on a different emotional level? I really feel like once you get to like past the teenage years into the 20s, into the 30s, like you mature into and it's how you mature. And so now that we're all divorced at this stage, we have to see, okay, what's the compatibility with the other person? And so I think that we all have our stories, and how are we going to go from now and to the
Right.
future?
Right. I had lost my train of thought, but I was going to say that I was just struggling to understand her and to understand what was going on and what was wrong, because I had no clue. I had no
Yeah.
idea.
You know, Tony, I have to wonder if she even knew what was going on. Sometimes those type of reactions, because I know people are trying to say she's being manipulative, but I have to wonder if it was more of a defense mechanism that kind of triggered. I don't know. But sometimes women, when they find themselves in situations like that, like, I mean, there's so many sources that could be from, like, who knows? So I don't know if she was just being manipulative, but I kind of think that probably not. If it was so long term, it was probably something deep seated in her, and that rejection just triggered whatever it is that she's dealt with in the past, and it just surfaced and her walls just went up.
So one thing I did forget to say is I was apprehensive to talk about my story a bit because I didn't want to come off as mean-spirited or gossipy or backbiting in any way. To this day, I still don't have a lot of my answers that I'd like to have, but I have. She just recently got remarried since our divorce last December, and her new husband is going through the same thing I went through. And so
So they're having intimacy problems, you mean?
like it's a long story.
Kind of weird that you know that, but
I don't know that. No, okay. So I don't know bedroom, but what we ended up at a New Year's party together because I crashed it. They didn't expect me to be there. It's a long story. We're in the same ward right now. And so her best friend is in this ward. It's one of those things where her best friend is married to my best friend. And so it's like, a house divided on their side. So I was tired of not getting the invites, so I'm like, I'm going to go to that New Year's party anyway. But I was just joking with my friend Jason, who's in the crowd, like, oh, we should do that. Like, that'd be hilarious, right? And I'm like, no, we can't do that. And then we actually got invited by like her son. We just ran into them at Walmart, and they're like, yeah, come on by. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to upset your mom, and because my kids were with her kids, or their kids, and then my kids were like, no, mom's not even there. Just come on by. I'm like, okay, we'll stop by. And then like 5 minutes after I got there, she showed up with her new husband. I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Oh my God.
He was a cool guy, and he was so nice to me, and it probably upset her that we were so like, hey, what's up, man? And like,
buddy.
yeah. But he kept trying to like grab her hand and hold her hand, and she would like shoo him away. And I don't know if she was just embarrassed because I was there. And like even Jason, my buddy in the crowd, saw some things, and we were talking about afterwards, and like, oh man, that doesn't bode well for them. Because I wouldn't have cared if they kissed, and he tried to kiss her and hug her and do all these things, and she wasn't having it.
Yeah, but I think, like, let's look from the other perspective, Tony, is that if she has a new spouse or husband or boyfriend and she's in the situation for the first time, it might be a little uncomfortable. No, I mean, I have totally been there, and I have totally introduced another spouse to a relationship, and it can be hard. It can be like tricky until the relationships are set in place. And once they're set in place, then you know what, you can move forward that way.
Right.
So it's hard.
I wasn't even in the same room, like, yeah, but I agree with you that who knows, but I wasn't even in the same room sometimes, and I was more worried, that he might have been maybe dealing with eventually some of the same things I dealt with, but who knows? So my whole point of bringing all that up was like I was a little awkward about talking about my story because we're even like in some of the groups, some of the LDS singles Facebook groups, when I look under like members, that you have things in common with, a lot of times we're like same friends. Like she, you know, she has friends in the group and I have friends, and it's just I want to be very respectful and what I went through, but it's factual. Like this is just facts of what I went through, and I wanted to share my story just because these are important subjects, and even when you're communicating and talking about these things before marriage, things can change, things can happen. And so my point of saying all this is, it may have triggered some trauma. It may have triggered something there. So again, I'm going to mention my therapist buddy. He knew her for a long period of time. And so for years and years in my marriage with her, I was struggling to just understand her and understand what was going on. And it was a huge burden, a huge weight that I was dealing with, because I just wanted to know, I just wanted to understand what was happening, what was going wrong. And he said, you know, he'd been doing therapy for 15 years at that point, and he usually could pinpoint what people were going through within 15, 30 minutes of meeting them for the first time. So he told me, he said, Tony, I've known Sarah for about 5 years now, and she's a mystery to me. So that was like a huge relief for me. It's like, the professional can't figure out what's going on. But his biggest assumption is that she had early childhood trauma. But yet she's never once ever mentioned anything about it. Anything happened.
What was her mom like?
Remember.
So both of her parents are converts. And
Her mom struggled with intimacy as well.
No.
Was this something taught in the home?
I don't know about early childhood, but as long as I've known her parents, she was the kind of woman to pinch her husband's butt on his way out of the room, you know. And he wasn't. So I would say it almost comes from her dad, because her dad grew up Amish.
Oh.
You guys are familiar with that religion. Very unique story. Like he was raised Amish, and how they met was like Vietnam War era. So they're pacifists, so they couldn't serve, but what they would do is volunteer their time at like the VA hospitals. So he was volunteering at the VA. She was working there as well, and he was like full on Amish, you know, dress, and she just thought he was the cutest thing ever, and started talking to him and found out that he was, you know, religious, and well, of course he is, but I mean, you know, that he was interested in talking about the Bible. So she just said, you know, brought up and introduced the Book of Mormon. So he met with the missionaries and eventually baptized, and they got married, and they have 7 kids together. So
do they hold some of those traditional views still? I mean, are they still a little bit, you know, Amish is a whole lifestyle. It's not just a religion. It is, you're in, right? Full steam ahead on that. And that's not something you just turn the train around on a dime.
Yeah.
So I can't answer that exactly how she was raised as far as that and sex. And I mean, I know a few things, but like her sisters were actually pretty sexually active before they were supposed to be, even growing up in the church. So I don't know. Not that means anything. I don't even know what that means, you know. It's just that I don't think it was repressed, or like, I don't know.
Did y'all ever do couples counseling?
Yes.
Did that help?
She hated it. She hated every minute of it, and I basically had
Why though?
Yeah, that's my question.
She would explain to me that it just felt like we're there focusing on her and all of her problems.
Right.
All picked on.
Yeah, I think she had something deep in her, and even if it was subconscious, like whatever it was, it didn't want to come out, you know, and that's tough. So now that you've been through what you've been through with your marriage and Sarah, looking forward, like moving forward, obviously you're looking for a relationship that is intimate and to where you can be sexually active to your heart's desire. So how do you think, what's a good transition? How do you see that happening? What are you going to do differently, maybe?
I'm going to throw a couple more things though in there real quick.
Okay.
Sarah was also a hoarder, which was probably the most difficult thing we dealt with, actually, beyond, because 10 years into our marriage, we actually figured out sex pretty good. And that's a whole different story. I can get into it. Part of it was, well, I mean, I can go into great detail if you want to.
That's
Well, I mean, it sounds like we'll kind of stick to the intimacy part. The hoarding to me just screams mental health issues, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we've got something going on there.
That actually
Right.
was my point. Like I meant like figuring out sex. Like we eventually did figure that out. We had problems with money as well. We eventually figured that out. What we never figured out was the hoarding and even how to raise the kids. And so eventually that's what did us in. We had a house fire in April of 2014 and everyone was safe. Very miraculous story there of how things happened, and how people were safe. Um, so because of the hoarding, it was like our family's deep dark secret that we tried to keep from everybody. And I almost felt a lot of guilt that it was my fault or part of my fault because I was working so much. I had to work a lot to support the family. She was always a stay-at-home mom. And I usually only had time on like Saturdays to help clean, but I would spend 6 to 8 hours every Saturday cleaning to get everything back in order. And it's a long story. The short story is when the firemen came in and saw the condition of the home, they called Child Protective Services.
oh,
And so that was just like horrific to go through. So I was like keeping up with all the public areas, but the fire actually happened in the basement and it was just mountain pile of clothes and toys and stuff everywhere. And so we had to go through that. We had to go through the home restoration and all that, contractors. And I took on a lot of the home restoration because the insurance company was going to pay me instead of, paying a contractor. So I took on that. And like I said, she had really extreme issues with money. And I'd given her a couple $1,000s to go buy mattresses. And she ended up just like blowing it instead. And the whole story behind it is like basically just kept asking like, how did this go? How did the buying mattresses go? And she just kept ignoring it. And the question, I'm like, what? And then eventually I figured out, I just asked her, I said, how much do you have left? And she maybe pulled out a few $100s. And I'm just like, I left that day. That was the day our separation started. Because in my mind, she couldn't pull it together just for a moment when our family was going through all this chaos. And so we were separated for a while and just went through hell and back for me to make the decision whether or not I should divorce her. And I eventually just went through with it. With everything that I had been dealing with through the years, I was just kind of done. And so fast forward after, the divorce was final, I remember like thinking, oh, I'm single. Like I can actually get out and date again. I can, have a second chance kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I swung way the other way because my whole goal was to find someone completely opposite from Sarah. Well, I found her because that's what I was looking for. And about 8 months after my divorce, I met a woman named Ellie. Met her online, and she was from Connecticut. She was a member. Celeste, you'd kind of mentioned about being away from the church for a while. She went through the same experience, left at around 15 or so, and then came back in her mid-20s. And I liked that about her. I actually liked that she got to go and experience things and kind of know, both sides. And one of my if someone wasn't willing to talk about sex, then I just wasn't interested.
yeah.
Well, Ellie was very open to it and talkative about it and liked to talk about it. Well, she had shown so much interest in me and made me feel so special. I mean, I just fell for her, hook, line, and sinker. I was in. And like I said, I think I said she was in Connecticut. So I was every other weekend, I was driving. I would go into work really early, like 3 or 4 a.m. on a Friday, get done around noon, jump in my car, drive an 11.5 hours to go see her, and then leave Sunday afternoon and 11.5 hours back home, go to work, Monday morning.
Wow.
I was trying to put in all this time and all this effort. Now the thing is, I'm gonna just say it, be honest. I didn't learn a whole lot from my first marriage. I didn't really learn. I felt like I was just so desperate for affection that as soon as I got it, I just went with it. And things were great. Like I was completely in love. And we ended up getting married. So like I said, I met her in October. It was about 8 months after my divorce. And then we got married in May. So that was pretty quick. And that was part of my learning experience. That was the really hard thing because our marriage lasted for about 2 months and I left.
Oh, dang.
Was this a temple marriage or just did you get married civilly or?
Civilly with the focus to eventually get sealed. So we had to go through the whole writing letters and going through that whole process. Because at that time you had to wait a year before you went.
Yep.
So
when you say it just sort of fell apart after 2 months, I mean, what exactly happened? Were there problems with intimacy yet again, like too much or?
No, she wanted it like twice a day, every day. I thought, this was great,
Yeah.
Well, I thought this is my fantasy. This is what I wanted. It gets exhausting after a while. I mean, that's what I learned. Like, maybe I don't actually want like this much, And I actually got to the point where, what I found really fascinating was I felt like I was seeing things from Sarah's perspective finally, because I finally actually went through, I had never not wanted sex, because I was getting.
So you know what, just for the women in the audience too, I just think that, you know what, Tony, that's really admirable that you're looking at it from a woman's point of view. I mean, sometimes as women, we are self-absorbed and we look at just from our point of view. And I think men do the same. And that's kind of an equal thing. And so listening to you and saying, okay, this is what she wants, this is what she needs, this is what we're used to, is really admirable. So
you're just, it's misplaced. I promise you.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, you know what, credit's due where it's due. So.
Well, again, I appreciate it. For me, it was a very hard lesson to learn to have to go through another divorce. But I like I was saying, I experienced for the first time not wanting to have sex, but then still going through it, because if I didn't, things were going to be a problem. Ellie would get extremely upset. And so it's basically like, if I don't sleep with her, she's not going to be happy. And then my life is going to be miserable. So I can talk a lot more about that relationship, but essentially, like, I left after, I mean, again, member of the church. Yeah, she fell away for a little bit, but she would scream and cuss at me for an hour straight. And for me, I grew up with an abusive stepfather, and I just shut down. I completely shut down. And I was kind of dealing with it. I thought, okay, in my mind, okay, we have a lot of things we need to work on. Like, I never saw this while we were dating. She never did this. The thing was, though, she never did it to me, but I saw her lose it on other people. And it wasn't a red flag for me because of all this attention that she was giving me, all this love and affection, that I just thought, I convinced myself she'd never do that to me. She'd never treat me that way, the way she's treating these other people. Like, I'm talking about like waiters or service workers. She was just awful to. Red flag. That should have been an immediate red flag.
How did she treat your kids?
Good, as far as I know. That's as far as I know. Yes. Someone said for me, I learned about borderline personality disorder in a very intimate way with Ellie. So what was happening is, for me, borderline, I just saw that in chats. That's what reminded me, was that she really could not control her emotions. So she tried to control everything around her.
Yeah.
To the point where if I didn't take out the trash correctly, I would get yelled at. We're talking about the trash. Like, you just take the trash out. Or if I didn't load the dishwasher right, if I didn't do the laundry right. And like I said, none of this came up in dating. None of it did. Like,
So not to totally change the course here, but so when you were dating Ellie, did you all have a really deep discussion on intimacy, and not just sex, but in intimacy in general, so that when you all got married, she might have felt more connected and more comfortable with the sexual situation? And like, did you learn anything from your first marriage that you brought into your second marriage? And then what are you going to do, like moving into the next, to keep that intimacy alive? And because it isn't just about sex, like especially for females, like we need to have that connection. So what do you think?
I've learned a lot, is what I've learned. I think it took me these 2 failures essentially to really learn a lot about women. I felt like I learned a lot about Sarah through my relationship with Ellie, because I felt like Ellie was kind of doing to me what I was doing to Sarah. Because not that it was the same, but I remember just being so frustrated all the time and so upset. And I didn't even touch on that. Like, I feel like I focused way too much on. I made lots of mistakes in my first marriage, and even my second marriage, because I just didn't know how to handle the stress and the anxiety and the confusion as to why things were happening. Because I had a completely different perspective about marriage and what.
Well, you didn't have the answers. It's hard to understand when you don't have the answers.
I shut down as well. Like, I was shutting down. I would get upset and angry and frustrated over the smallest things. And like I said, I felt like I was Ellie all of a sudden. Like, I almost understood, like, oh, this must have been really awful for Sarah to deal with. Just like it's awful for me to deal with Ellie and her anger and issues. So what I've learned is that, yes, it's way more than sex. Intimacy can be just, how was your day? You know, how are you feeling? Or even like with Ellie, she would get so upset if I loaded the dishwasher wrong. But at that time, I thought, well, if the dishes are getting washed, like, what's the big deal? To where with Ellie, okay, this is what I learned with Ellie, is that it wasn't the dishes necessarily. She would sometimes transition. She would fight about the dishes or want to fight about the dishes, but actually it was something else that was bothering her. And so she would transition into the actual problem.
Yeah, the dishes were secondary at that point.
Absolutely secondary.
Right.
And as a guy, I hate to use a stereotype, but yeah, I felt like, what's wrong? Like, I think the dish is getting done. Like, I should have realized there's something more that she wants to talk about. There's something that's bothering her. And so I felt like I have learned quite a bit through those 2 relationships. And like what I'm seeking now, like, there is a huge blessing to growing older for guys, I think, because my sex drive is going down. And so that means, like, I care way more about my personal relationships, my emotional needs, and what relationship means to me, because it's way more than sex. It's way more than sex. I wish I could go back to, like, 24-year-old Tony and say, get a clue, man. Like, it's way more about, I still feel like if I could go back and talk to myself and say, just stop focusing on the sex so much, whether that happens or not, and just care about the individual and what's going on with them and your wife, and making sure that her emotional needs are met. Because for me, that is what, I mean, for me, that's what I learned is that women are way more emotional creatures than men are.
Yeah.
And so
For sure.
There's a good chance that if you find yourself in struggles like that and you do remove sex from the equation and just focus on the female, the byproduct will be sex. Like they'll feel more comfortable, understood, and loved and connected. And then all of a sudden it's like there's that freedom or that feeling to be sexual, whereas before maybe it was kind of closed off because it's connected for us, right? It's not like different. So,
You know, with Sarah, I felt like I literally have like 5 or 6 moments in our 13 and a half year marriage where she wanted sex. She really she was motivated for it. And I specifically remember one time where she just was like, "Do you want to go into the bedroom?" And that was like, what? Like, what just happened? You know, like, yes, I want to go in the bedroom. And so it was great for like 2 or 3 days. And I'm like, what? I ruined the whole thing because I said, what did I do that, got you in the mood? And her talking and giving me the answer for some reason turned it off because it stopped after that. But she had told me that we're sitting there watching TV and I just laid my head down on her lap and that was it. She said it felt like we were dating, like we're in high school. I'm like, wow, okay. Like, so just that one little thing that I had done, because I always kind of felt like she was a Pandora's box and I had to figure out what I had to do to get her in the mood. Because as soon as I made a wrong turn, it was off. She was off.
do you know what her love language was? Is it like, because that might have been
Quality time was big for
Yeah.
her. I mean, her family grew up just board games. I used to make a joke that, one of the 101 ways to catch a miller is to put a board game out and have a big trap over the top and you can catch them. Board
I
game is
actually love board games too.
That sounds like Celeste.
So do I.
I am the
I'm a
world's
Miller.
worst at board games. I will lose every single one twice, like without even trying. So I'm just terrible at them.
So, I mean, I don't think young Tony knew that though. I'll be honest. I don't think I learned her love language. And
I think
let's
that's
be
important
honest.
for intimacy. Oh, go ahead.
When you're younger, I mean, it sounds like you're maybe a little hard on yourself for young Tony, right? Because I could say young Everett, Celeste could probably say young Celeste, Jennifer could say young Jennifer. I mean, that's life, right? We're going to continue growing and learning and understanding relationships better. I mean, we're always doing things wrong, and that's the process of maturation and becoming better and better at what we do. My question really is, though, with Ellie, it was so quick. It's a whirlwind, but we're talking a marriage here. Did you guys go through or at least attempt any sort of counseling, or was that just like, forget it, I don't even care about counseling, I just want out?
No, that was big for both of us, is that we did premarital counseling and we went through it. We didn't go through like tons of sessions. We probably did 3 or 4 sessions together. So I don't know. I would do it again. So one big thing is, now for my third go around, it's going to be a very long engagement. It's going to be a very long dating process. 100%. I believe in the 4 seasons now more than ever. Put someone through every situation, get to know them. You have to know how someone handles stress.
And go on a road trip.
Go on a road trip. Yes, I say
Yes,
that.
go on a road trip.
Yes, I say that.
Do it.
I say that same thing. Absolutely. Because you could be like Nick and just break down in Springfield, and then you're gonna see someone handle stress and how well they do it.
Right.
I mean, anyone that I'm dating can come into the garage with me and help me fix a car. Like, you'll see me get stressed out and how I handle it. But even kids and like trying to blend families together, and there's a ton to dating. So I can talk a little bit about someone that I just finished dating, and I don't have permission to talk about them, so I'm not going to mention their name. But intimacy and sex came up, and it was something that I wanted to know about and wanted to talk about. She felt very uncomfortable talking about it, and she said, I don't feel comfortable talking about it, but I will talk about it after marriage. And to me, that was a red flag. Like, did not. To me, that was, no, this is a problem for me.
I think that I think to kind of step like right here, there are a lot of people that are not comfortable talking about intimacy before marriage.
Mhm.
They're just not. It's a culture thing. And I think that you have to find your person. I think that there is your person, and like if you're not going to talk about anything and you want to keep everything inside and you want to read the scriptures every night and not do anything else, then that is your thing. And I'm not taking that away from anybody, but I also think that there are people that want to talk. There are people that want to communicate. There are people at our age that still want a sexual life going forward. And so that is something before you get married, you have to identify with, because if you do not identify with it before marriage, it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be a disaster.
I got that a little bit. It's like, so now I'm kind of stuck in between, like, also if someone is overtly sexual, I get turned off as well. Because Ellie was overtly sexual and Sarah was the opposite. I mean, I don't.
You're like the three bears. You found too hot and too cold.
Right. I almost called Sarah asexual. She wasn't quite asexual. She was close to it. So yeah, I want someone right down the middle of the road. But yeah, you have to talk about it. Like, and it's not like I want to sext with someone or talk dirty, or I don't want to know about positions or anything like that. I think I have two basic questions about it. Do you like it? And the more intimate question that I think is still important is, can you have an orgasm? I think that's important for me, because guys are easy. Women are much more complicated when it comes to that.
You know what? I really think that, Tony, that comes with communication. It really does, because I think that in your shoes, you're somebody that wants to make sure that a girl is pleasured, and they want to, and I'm trying to keep everything classy. And you know what? It really is. It's not like anything's trashy here. I
Yeah.
just think that you want to find somebody that wants that you can pleasure, and that it can be reciprocal.
Exactly.
And so I think that it's really, really important. I mean, really important, you guys, going into the next stage, whether you're getting married for the first, second, third time, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever time it is, that you communicate about what your needs are. And if you have to go through all the seasons, go through the seasons. If it's not going to be the seasons and you feel some spiritual, I mean, like nobody can live in your relationship. And so I really feel like you can be only as open as the person that you're going to be engaged with.
Yeah.
All good points. And someone just asked, like, when do you bring up intimacy? Well, part of that is you don't talk about intimacy the second day you matched on mutual. Like, I'm not going to do that, you know? So, but it's important at some point. I don't even know exactly what that point is. But as you get closer to an engagement, or especially after an engagement, you should know.
Oh, I think you should know before an engagement.
Probably.
Yeah, I do
That's
too.
my opinion.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I also think, and I know I kind of touched on this here and there, I really think knowing your partner's love language is like key to intimacy. Like if you're trying to give gifts to make her feel better, but she wants quality time, like it's not gonna like work right. And I'm not a fan of thinking about love language toward ourselves. Like, you need to love me this way. I'm a fan of saying love your whoever, your significant other in a certain way. And I think if you do that and you focus on the other person and what makes them feel loved, and they reciprocate, it just becomes a really good, healthy situation, which then intimacy can grow within that type of an atmosphere.
I can tell you to kind of add on to that is that's very important. And I know as for myself, I'm a natural fixer. And that's one of the biggest things I struggle with is when someone I'm in a relationship with wants to talk about the problem, I want to fix it instead of they just want me to listen to that, you know.
Right.
So part of that is being a guy, right?
Yes.
But
Well,
you
guys
automatically
like
fix
that,
things
right?
too. So you're like a double fixer. Like, I want to fix your problems, and when I'm done with that, I'm going to go fix your car. So
right. Or just just have me go fix your car.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a growing process, and for a while too, I had a hard time even with the church, to be honest, and the way I felt like the church had a lot to do with how Sarah was. I mean, I think there was early childhood trauma, but there's also like the aspect of
Your chewed gum during young women
Yeah.
like lessons. How about that? Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
is that a inside story?
Well, they're always like use the you don't want to be a piece of chewed gum, right?
Oh,
So you want to be a virgin, which I'm like, hello, you're not like that's what the atonement is for.
I
Don't
literally have never heard that
Yes.
analogy before.
really? Oh my gosh, it's because you're not in Young Women's. I'm telling
Yeah.
you, it's horrible,
I tried
It
once, they
is.
kicked me out,
horrible.
So I mean, for me, I don't know what it's like, but the way I kind of perceive it, it's like, don't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex.
Mhm.
Like that's how the leaders, like they're terrified if their youth have sex and just
Right.
don't have it, don't have it, don't have it. And they're like, oh yeah, okay, you're good now. Like go ahead and have sex. And then it's like, you can't transition into that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's exactly what happened with Sarah and I think it's part of it because obviously I told you about some of the rejection trauma that she felt, that I felt like opened the floodgates for other problems. But I got to the point where like she made me feel almost ashamed for my sexuality. Like I just really felt that. And then again, the more positive aspect with my relationship with Ellie, even though it ended like a, I don't know, dumpster fire, she healed me. I felt she like really healed me from all of that rejection, and like I felt ugly, I felt unwanted, I felt all these feelings, and like for her to just care for me and love me and want to be with me sexually, that helped me a ton with my confidence, a ton. And even though I think I get a little ashamed talking about 2 divorces, I I am thankful that I went through both, actually both relationships, because
Well, and I think that a lot of people here that are getting remarried and I think sometimes, and I got remarried for only a year and a half, and I call it my trial. And I feel like sometimes for me, it was 26 years of marriage. And then I went through my trial, and it was like, oh my goodness, like what can I really handle? And it was tough. It was really, really, really tough, but I call it my trial. And now I had to get myself back in gear and myself healthy. And so I can put myself out there again.
right, because that question has come up on some of the LDS singles Facebook groups. Would you marry or would you date anyone who's had multiple marriages? And there's more people said no, like red flag, like no, absolutely not. That's a huge red flag for me. And it's just like time out, like you don't know exactly what someone's gone through. There's this idea that it must be me, like I must be the problem, and it's not that I'm not. It's just that I think my story is kind of unique. But I don't know. I've never really ran into someone with the same exact kind of scenario and things I dealt with, because it was, like I said, we didn't really go into it, but it was a lot more than just sex that was the issue in our relationship.
So what I'd like to do, I mean, we've got a lot of people in the audience and that have kind of gone through stuff as well. But as we're talking here, we're going to kind of make this a rolling question and answer session. So if anybody has a question or something that they would like to discuss, obviously on topic, we're not going to talk about like how your ex, was terrible with their bank account or something like that. So please stick on topic. But if you have something you would like to contribute or a question definitely for any of us, including Tony, please raise your hand and we'll call on you one at a time and kind of have you ask your question. If you'd prefer, you can actually come on camera as well. If not, then that's okay. Just turn on your audio and ask the question, but we'll call you one at a time. Please raise your hand. So having said that, I just see a lot of chatter in the audience. So, we would like to open it up if somebody would like to discuss that as well. But in the meantime, going through these experiences in marriage really kind of blazes a trail of like, okay, part of it is, what did I do wrong? Part of it is, what do I do better in the future, right? And for me, I've always thought I really want to go through counseling together, because even if I feel like, dude, we don't need that, everything's perfect, right? I think we need it. If nothing else, I need it. Like, I am at this point in my life because I have things to work on. And anybody, I think probably even some of the best marriages I know, could benefit from counseling. So in your current situation, is that something obviously you have your friend, are you still going through therapy? Are you considering that as somebody that you are dating or would date?
Yes, I believe even therapy on a personal, ongoing level, even if it's only 4 times a year, I think it's good to just check in and check on things and talk to somebody. I 100% believe in talk therapy. Even beyond your friends, with professionals. I would absolutely require it with any engagement. That's just something I wouldn't budge on. Because it'd be almost a red flag if they didn't want therapy. For me, that's just
so me. And I have to stop really quick. I'm such a huge advocate for therapy, personal and relationship, and even separate with kids that have been through divorce. I think that therapy, letting them get everything out, and us getting everything out personally together, I think the tricky part is finding a therapist.
It is.
And I really feel like sometimes you have to hire and fire and hire and fire to find the person. And I think that long-term it's worth it. I really think that it's worth it. And so I'm not a therapist. Yes, I am to friends, or I am, but I just think that it's a huge thing, huge to get everything out on the table.
Absolutely. So like I said, I had just come out of, it was more like 8 or 10 months relationship. And that was one thing that was hard, because my first reaction was, well, let's go through my friend, who knows me very well. And that was too close. Like, she didn't like that, which was fine. But then, we had to shop around a bit and try to find somebody, and that it is hard. I think that for me is the hardest part of therapy, or finding a good therapist is, finding one that you both like or agree on, or, have together. So what's great is the church has been embracing emotional health a lot more, which I find is just wonderful.
Amazing.
Yeah, church services are growing. It's very hard when you're outside of Zion to get good church services. Like,
when you live in the mission field,
right?
Yeah.
Anyone who's listening in from Utah right now, there's church services like everywhere. So grab hold of it, like, use it. It's amazing. Like, back in the day, our counselor, our church counselor, or whoever, would come up from Indianapolis like once every 3 months or something. It was difficult. So yeah, just don't knock it till you try it.
So we had a question from Jason, I think, in the audience.
Jason.
Oh, is it my friend Jason?
Maybe.
I don't know Jason's though. Maybe, yeah.
It is.
Uh-oh, this could be a rough question then.
It could be.
We can't hear you. I don't know if your microphone's not working or if you're muted, but nope.
So he's the guy that went with me. He was my partner to go help Nick.
Oh, all right. Great.
There we go.
Can we hear him yet? Too bad.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, he is? Okay.
Okay.
Good.
I can
Cool.
hear you.
So I had something that is not quite a question, but a statement that, you know, as we talk about intimacy, I think that the question also implies is the worthiness, because I think nowadays we find ourselves more or less distracted with the world around us, the social media, through trying to get acceptance or validation from other people around us. And when realistically, we should be finding validation from our spouses in the first place. One thing that my ex would have a situation, or even she went to the bishop about, was that she wasn't able to claim me as a best friend anymore because of just because she, I guess you can say, fell out of love. And that was something that was hard for her. So I guess my question then would be is that how can you, or how would you be able to bring somebody back into, you know, a spouse, bring back into your life that doesn't want to be your friend anymore, who doesn't want to be that person in your life that wants to come to you about everything just because, you know, they're more interested in what the people around them or the attention that person wants to get, like the people in their media or the social media or the friends outside them lives besides you. How would you kind of try to bring that in, even though if you're trying to concentrate on the love language they have, but they just don't accept it anymore?
So wait, Jason, I'm trying to like figure this out. Are you talking about ex-spouses with this? Are you
No,
talking
just more
about
like as in a marriage though, because
okay.
as during my last marriage, towards the end especially, like even when we weren't having trouble, she would be very open about the fact that, you know, even to me, that I don't look at you as my best friend anymore. Like I'm, you know, I have two other best friends in my life. So she would be very openly excluding me out of her little best friend group. So it's kind of like, how would you try to help a person in your life that you love to bring that person back into your life, to make them help them realize that, you know,
You know what, for me personally, Jason, I mean, when you're talking about an ex and you're talking about kids involved, I think that you love your children enough that you want to get along with that person. And there might be a lot of difficulties there. And I think that you just have to learn, and it's hard. I'm not saying that it's overnight. I'm not saying it's not through therapy. I'm not saying that. I really think that you have to learn to get along with that ex. And I'm saying get along. I mean, some people have better relationships than others, but for the children.
Well, not about, I'm talking about during the marriage though. During the marriage, how throughout a marriage, how could you try to bring that person back into your life? Now, this is before you go to the divorce situation.
So you know what? My thing is go on a trip. Go on a trip, and I don't care if you're camping in your backyard. I really don't care. I mean, where it is. I'm not saying you have to go on an exotic trip, but you know what? Go camping where there is no distractions, where there is no children, and we have children and they're distractions. And I'm not saying they're bad, they're good, but they're distractions. We have callings, we have jobs, we have all these things that are distractions. And I really think that you have to focus, and you have to take that time to focus on that one individual to see if that is going to work. If that's not going to work, and go 3 days. I mean, I'm not saying a week, but go 3 days and say, oh my gosh, this is going to work. This is not going to work. But I think that there's a lot going into play here. So,
you know, I'll just say that in a marriage, I think any marriage, you can fall out of love. I mean, that can happen for both people. It can happen for one or the other. As President Uchtdorf said, marriage is one of those things that takes continuous polishing. But I've mentioned this study several times on here. There was a study of people who had quote unquote fallen out of love, right? And they kind of broke them off into two groups. One would receive therapy and agree to kind of work on things and continue to go and try and make the marriage work. The other one just divorced, right? And so they went through and did a study on these people. What happened 5 years later? Those people who were quote unquote out of love, they just kind of had lost that interest with their partner. those people after 5 years with marriage were, for the most part, all still married and had reported being more in love than they ever were before. Those people who had divorced, who just said, you know what, at that point we weren't in love anymore and we split. At that point, 5 years later, most of them were not any happier than they were in the point where they were, quote unquote, out of love and unhappy. And so in this life, you're going to have those moments where, I mean, I don't know what it is in the church, but there just sort of seems to be this sort of misnomer that once we get married and we go to the temple, that's some sort of magical solution that's going to prevent Satan from coming into our marriages and wreaking havoc, or at least trying to break up homes. It's never going to stop in this life. Unless we get to the millennium, it's never going to stop. He's never going to stop. So you may fall out of love. Your spouse may fall out of love. The real question is, are you willing to ride that storm together? Are you willing to start the counseling? Excuse me, I got a dry throat here. I've been coughing or chugging down the cough drops, but are you willing to ride those storms together? If the answer is no, I just simply want to go do my thing, you can't control that other person. You can't step in and say, well, you're my wife or you're my husband and you're going to go to counseling with me and you're going to drag them along. That's taking away somebody's free agency. And that's exactly what Heavenly Father prevented Satan from doing, right? We can't force anybody. All we can do is try and lay that path and say, look, I really want to make this marriage work. I understand maybe you've fallen out of love with me. Maybe it's something I'm doing. I mean, that's entirely possible. Maybe, my feet stink really bad at night when we go to bed and you just can't take it anymore. I don't know what it might be. But with therapy and counseling and continuing to look at a marriage as something sacred and saying, all right, we're going to work on this together. And if they're willing to do that and you're willing to get help, I think that Heavenly Father is willing to come in and be that third piece that kind of helps carry that forward. But without that selfishness, with a person who just simply wants to do what they want to do, you can't stop them. There's no magical bullet that will just simply like hit the target and make everything okay.
Well, I think sometimes we have to step back too, and we have to remember how we fell in love. We have to remember what those feelings were like before children. And I'm just saying, like, fair across the board. We have to just step back ourselves and say, okay, it's not them, it's not us. It's like, why did we fall in love? Let's go back to that stage. And hey, if we cannot get past that stage, then you know what? We have to move on. We have to move on. And but let's try to figure out, if we can, why did you fall in love? Why?
Tony, I see you shaking your head, nodding your head. And I know you got something to add.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you, Jason, by the way. I don't know.
Thank you, Jason.
That's what I was thinking the whole time, is marriage is a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And if you're not equally yoked in that work, it can be difficult, because that's how I felt, is that we were not equally yoked.
Right.
And so then you start having all these feelings that you have to fight. But ultimately, I found, I was just like, memories coming back about, when Jennifer was talking, I specifically had to start realizing, like, Sarah needs a break. Being a stay-at-home mom is one of the toughest jobs there is. And the mistake I made, young Tony again, is thinking your job's easy. You get to stay at home, you get to do what you want, you're in climate controlled environment. I remember, like, there's time periods when I was like in Milwaukee delivering reels of wire and it was like negative 30 degrees out, and I'm just sitting here in my mind the whole time thinking Sarah's at home warm in bed. And it'd be this pride cycle that was coming up in our marriage, and then I'd come home and be jealous of her, but then she was jealous of me that I was even outside the home,
That you got to speak to an adult.
Yeah, right.
But you weren't talking in baby language the whole day.
Communication is like so
Or
key,
teenage language.
because I didn't understand. I had no clue at that time. I just had no idea what it was like. I thought she had it easy. She thought I had it easy. and it was just interesting to look back at those times. So spending that time and giving her a break, those were some of the best memories of our marriage. And we just said, all right, whoever take the kids, and Sarah and I are going to go off and we're going to do our own little weekend. We do little weekend getaways. And those things, that was way further on. We had to take so much time to learn these things. But if you know that now, like, man, I just, like you talked about with kids, I just want to take my kids and say, this is what you do. Like, this is how you do it. Like, trust me. Like, I know now what it takes to have a successful marriage. But I had no clue. No one taught me. No one sat down and said, this is what women need. And I don't feel like Sarah had that, got that talk either. This is what men need.
Yep.
And
Well, I think that kudos to you, Tony, that I think that we're all different. And I think that you looked at that and I was like, wow, he's amazing for recognizing all of that. Because a lot of times women, we don't recognize what the man has to go do and outside the home. And then the men don't realize what's happening in the home. And I think that it's a communication breakdown. It's not like men versus women. It's just, we don't understand. We're not communicating. And so I actually really appreciate how respectful that you are of Sarah. I could tell you think really highly of her. And obviously you have had your differences with her and it led to a divorce, but unfortunately, but I mean, super respectful.
It's because of the hoarding, because that was just a unique thing that we had to deal with. I personally feel Sarah and I would still be married to this day if the hoarding wasn't an issue. 100%.
Really?
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
Because
Are we talking extreme hoarding, like paths through the rooms because there's just stuff everywhere?
Like be on TV hoarding?
Yeah, she was not a clean hoarder. It wasn't like collecting stuff. It was trash. Like you couldn't see the floor. I know this is hard. It's hard for me to talk about, but when I finally had a chance to come home and have time to help, I would literally take a snow shovel and push everything up into a huge pile in the room, in each room. And then I had to sort through the trash, the clothes, the toys, and, stuff that we kept or threw away. There's rotten food, there was diapers, there was all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, it was to an extreme. Like, when I talk about my divorce story, saying that she was messy is like, it doesn't even come close.
Was she emotionally connected to her stuff? Like you couldn't just go in and like take it all out and throw it away, right?
It was like when we went through counseling, it was explained to me that it's like the therapist asked, do you make your bed, when you get up in the morning? And for me, I answered no. And they said, why not? I go, because it's a waste of time. Like, I'm just going to make it messy again. Like, I'm weird. Like, I make the bed before I get it every night, but I would just leave it in shambles. And she said, that's how Sarah feels about a house. Like, why should I clean it? Because it's just going to get destroyed again. So that was kind of, it helped me understand her a little bit better. But there's something that Everett said that I can't remember I was going to talk about, but I remember at 10 years into our marriage, I accepted that I was in a loveless marriage. I just accepted it. And somehow that acceptance made things so much better. And I don't know why I'm mentioning that, but it just came to my mind that I remember specifically going through that and just accepting, this is the situation, this is what it is, I'm here for the kids. And I'm going to stay here for the kids. But we actually started getting a little bit better on a lot of different things, and we were able to connect a little bit better because it's almost like I just took the pressure off and just said, you know what, this is what it is, and I'm gonna kind of focus. I bought a sports car. I went through my midlife crisis and bought a sports car, and so when things were frustrating, I went out and waxed it. So I don't know. I kept that thing spotless, absolutely spotless.
I think probably everybody's heard it many times before, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have the exact quote, but it was, I believe, President Hinckley or Sister Hinckley when they said, I'm pretty sure it was Sister Hinckley. What was the formula for a great marriage for you? And she said, low expectations, and I think that's really it. I mean, we kind of go into these marriages thinking, I'm going to have this amazing sex life, or I'm going to have, this or that. And it's going to like be all my wildest dreams come true. And then you get there and you're like, wait, what? Like, what just happened? This is not what I thought it was going to be. And we almost set ourselves up for failure, right? Because we just,
and I really think for the second time around, I mean, second, third, fourth, whatever time around, we set ourselves up for failure. We were like, okay, we're not knowing what we need, what we want. We're not communicating. And if we do not do those things, we are going to fail in our relationships. And I love how Tony has been so open about the positives, the negatives in his relationship, and been so open, because I really feel like a lot of people can relate to Tony right now. I really feel like, his wanting to give and her wanting to, and him keeping things really respectful of Sarah. Tony. And then, come on, you drove 4 hours to help Nick. Come on, you are amazing.
Jason was there too. Like, Jason's awesome.
Okay, well, Jason's amazing too.
I want to give a shout out to Jason while I have the public chance to do so. He is a sole custody father of 3 kids, 3 amazing kids. And he's been that way for 5 years. You want to correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but just an absolute stud. Anyone who wants a good priesthood hope, a good father, and a future awesome husband, you guys need to check out Jason. Anyone in the crowd.
Awesome. Good shout out. So really quick, I just want to touch on something and then we'll wrap this up that was spoken of in the chat. Someone had mentioned, well, if you're in this loveless marriage and the person will not do counseling, like what else can you do? And my reply was, there's really not much you can do, because, people have agency, and, you just either need to live with it or get out. Like, those are your options. And she had brought up, well, what about prayer? Some people say that you can pray and fix the situation. So here's my issue with that. That is true if both people involved want the situation to be fixed. Absolutely. Right. The Lord can come in, heal it as if there was no cracks, and just make it even stronger. Yep. But the misconception is that we, as one person of the couple, can pray enough to fix the marriage, or to fix the other person, or to create something that the Lord's just going to fix it for us. But the thing is the Lord will not take away urgency, and he will not force the second half to want to stay in the marriage, or to want to do whatever it is they're not doing. And so pray, absolutely, but recognize that the Lord will never overstep his bounds, and he will never force something on the other person. So anyway, with that being said, I just wanted to thank you for coming on, Tony. You were amazing. And you are like a deep well of like emotional and your willingness to open up and to share all the different aspects of your life was just really refreshing. And I appreciate that.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
And it was a great topic, and we could have probably talked for a lot more hours on that same topic. But I just
really, Tony, I don't know, what your after party schedule is, but I really think that you have a lot to offer to this group. I really do. I think that your experiences, you're keeping it real, you're being a convert to the church, I think is like such a bonus here, because I think we have a lot of converts here. I think your story is such a great story to tell. And so, if you can join us and in any conversations in the after party, I think that you're amazing.
Yeah. So we are just about to enter into the after party. If you want to stay, you definitely can. And that just is where the audience will come in, open up their mics, open up their videos if they would like. And then we'll just have it's almost just an open forum. There's no real structure to it, just kind of having fun. But I'm going to go ahead, and no, I'm not, because Everett is host. I was going to take this off of Facebook, but I can't do that now.
No, you're not.
So I guess part of our after party is going to be on Facebook. So just beware for all the audience members. This is still being recorded because I do not have access to turn it off. So if you want to come on, you want to open up your videos, if you want to open up your mics, please feel free to do so. Just recognize you are being recorded until ever gets back. He had to take a phone call real quick, but as soon as he gets back, he can turn that off. But for now, if you come on, you're gonna be part of the show. So go ahead and
You know
open
what?
up.
There's a lot of people that want to come on and be part of the show. So come on, guys.
So I'm gonna go ahead. If you have any issues with like turning on your audio or video, let us know, because sometimes we shut them off for various reasons, and then you guys have to have permission to turn it back on. So just let us know in the chat if you're having an issue with that.
Celeste, it's Josh. I'm having issues with my video again. You blocked me.
Josh, you always have issues with your
No,
video.
Josh, we have to see your treehouse.
I think it's totally like a hint from the Zoom gods that you just need to.
From the Zoom gods.
Is anybody else having issues? I can let you on if you want me to. No, everybody doing okay?
I've got my mic going, but there goes the camera.
Oh yeah, you're good. You're on.
I just want to thank Tony for coming on and doing this topic. I think it was really well done.
Yeah. I
Yep,
like
good job, Tony.
willingness to share. I think this is a lot, and not only just share, but share kindly and not in a I'm gonna bash my.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
Well, the way I see it is the way I approached the divorce, because it was so hard. I mean, I never who expects to go through a divorce or want a divorce? You know,
Right.
you're getting married and you're going through the temple to create a family, an eternal family.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, you know, I want to be able to return back home and talk to my Heavenly Father and let him tell him I did the best I could with her.
Yep.
For, you know, the whole time, not just marriage, after marriage, the whole time. And she's still the mother of my children. That will never change. So
Yep.
as frustrated as I can get, it's not like I mean, I censored myself a little bit tonight, but I mean, there's still just the other mistake I made that I wanted to say was I had this idea that divorce would also solve everything, because, you know, Everett said that we had this idea that, you know, eternal or getting married in the temple, that just fixes everything and everything will be fine. I thought made the same mistake with divorce, thinking, well, this will solve all the problems that we've been having, and no, it's a continuation.
Yeah, I think if there's an unsolved problem, yeah, that just carries into the next relationship, which is why I'm such a big proponent of therapy.
Therapy. Exactly.
Like, I love therapy. Like, I love my therapist, and when you find one that's just perfect for you, like, you just can't let them go.
Yeah, but
And
it's
seriously,
got to
like-
be the right therapist, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I had multiple experiences with the wrong therapist that went absolutely nowhere. In fact, probably caused more harm.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I managed to find a good one after my first divorce that really helped, but it took a lot of doing to find a good one.
Yep.
Well, and you know what? I like that you said that, because I really feel like that it does take some time to take the right one, or to find the right one. And I think that sometimes it's not through LDS social services. I think that they're actually great. If you can find a connection, then that's amazing. But if you can't, keep searching, because I really feel, I mean, like, I am like Celeste, I'm like a big proponent of, and it doesn't have to be every week. Like, if I'm struggling, if I'm like going through a week of like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Then you call up the therapist and you're like, hey, and they know the history. It's not like a